Hello, hi everyone. Welcome back to Woo Can Cook. My name is Wesley, and this is a show where we are slowly cooking our way through all of the food from my childhood. Today we're diving back into our series dedicated to deconstructing Americanized Chinese cuisine with a shot at the cashew chicken from P.F. Chang's, courtesy of a request via YouTube a few months back. For those new to the channel, in this series we have been deconstructing iconically Americanized dishes from Chinese cuisine, and then seeing what it might look like if we were to cook the dish through the lens of more traditional Chinese wok cooking. Now, right off the bat, I'll start off by saying that this particular cashew chicken did at one point start off inspired by the version found at P.F. Chang's, but I also know that where we ended up is quite far off the mark though too, for a few different reasons. First off, the P.F. Chang's version of what they call their almond and cashew chicken is actually discontinued at most Bay Area based P.F. Chang's locations, so our jumping off point here for this particular recipe was primarily based off of photos, mostly blurry ones at that. But more importantly, I also think that the P.F. Chang's version of this dish is a great example of how the Americanization of Asian cuisine centers a lot around just jamming as many goddamn things that you can possibly fit into one dish. The P.F. Chang's cashew chicken, as I understand, contains bell peppers, onions, mushrooms, celery, bamboo shoots, water chestnuts, almonds, cashews, and of course, chicken, which, good lord, that's a lot of things to shove into one stir fry, many of which are simply filler ingredients like water chestnuts, celery, and almonds. So for our version today, we're going to be dialing back on our ingredients list a good bit so that we may place a little bit more focus on our cashews, which I personally think is a really wonderful and toothsome addition to a stir fry, and it would be a shame if we were to drown them out with filler ingredients. Then finally, to pair with this, I'll also be assembling a fairly light and acid-forward sauce base with just a tiny bit of black bean paste to give us a bump in umami as well. Okay, so let's get into it.
In my head, I stick it that I've always dreamed of. So what's the difference when the world burns down on its own and it hurts me, baby, can I be honest?
Okay, so jumping right in, I'm kicking things off, as with most of our stir fries, with our aromatic veggies. This is 4 cloves of crushed and minced garlic, followed by 1 inch or about 1 tablespoon of finely minced ginger, heading into our wok in a moment for our stir fry. Then rounding this out is going to be about 4 Thai chilies, destemmed and sliced thinly with the seeds still intact. This is going to give us a nice heat addition, which should pair well with our bright acid-forward sauce element coming up. Then next up is a single red bell pepper, which we're flipping on its head so that we may slice around the core for easy removal. I'm pulling out this white membrane here, which is going to be a little bit too bitter to eat, and then finally large dicing these all up. Now, I will also admit that I know that the P.F. Chang's version contains green bell peppers, which are bitter and gross, so instead we are unapologetically using a far superior, sweeter, crisper, and more flavorful red bell pepper for our version today. Moving right along, rounding out our veggies is going to be half of a sweet white onion, which I'm peeling and then removing the tip end, and finally large dicing with the root end still attached for a nice even dice. And that's it. Those are all of the vegetables that we're using today. I'm just gonna say it, if you find yourself using more than 2 or 3 vegetables in a stir fry, you probably need to rethink your plan here, because you're probably on your way to a jumbled up mess of a stir fry. Alright, moving on to our sauce next, we're going to be focusing on developing a nice bright and acidic sauce base for our cashew chicken today, which I think is going to work really nicely with the flavor of our cashew nut. First up is going to be 4 tablespoons of soy sauce and a single tablespoon of brown sugar to kick things off, followed by a single tablespoon each of oyster sauce and black bean paste. This is going to give us a tiny bump of richness and umami to our stir fry to balance everything out. Then rounding this all out as promised is going to be 2 tablespoons each of Shaoxing wine and rice vinegar for our acids. Then we're mixing this all up to combine and setting it aside while we dive into our chicken next. Okay, so we're going with chicken thighs here today because the extra fat is going to help us achieve some nice wok hei with our sear in a moment. We're large dicing these into about 1/2 inch pieces and then immediately switching back to a wooden cutting board as soon as possible because that was weird. But anyway, we're doing a fairly simple marinade here inspired by our Kung Pao chicken recipe from a few months back, which used a little bit of hoisin sauce to add some sugar to the mix. This is 4 tablespoons of soy sauce here to start, followed by 2 tablespoons of hoisin sauce, and finally a half teaspoon each of white pepper and cornstarch to round this all out. I'm giving this all a toss to combine and then letting it marinate for 30 minutes. Then last up, in a separate bowl, I'm dissolving 2 tablespoons of cornstarch in water for our cornstarch slurry, and we're heading over to the stove. Over on the stove, I have my wok heating up as hot as possible, then I'm adding 4 tablespoons of peanut oil and, as always, long yao for that nice non-stick surface. Then first up here, we're starting off with the sear to our chicken thighs, which I'm carefully adding to the wok, holding back as much of the liquid in our marinade as possible unless you want some gnarly oil burns, Wesley. I'm laying out our chicken flat on the surface of the wok, then letting it sear undisturbed for 2.5 minutes before tossing, and that's why we use chicken thighs. The extra fat in our chicken thigh is going to render during that sear and will ignite nicely when we toss for some nice smoky wok hei addition to our stir fry. Then I'm pulling this all out after an additional 1 minute of tossing, and then deglazing all of this fond left behind in the wok with our sauce element plus about a half cup of water as well. We're letting this reduce for about 2 to 3 minutes while we get to work on incorporating all of this reserved chicken fat on the wok surface. Then I'm removing the sauce, wiping down the wok, reheating, adding an additional 4 tablespoons of peanut oil, and giving 1 more long yao so that we may move on to our veggies next. Kicking things off here first is going to be our garlic, ginger, and Thai chilies, which we're blooming for about 15 seconds until nice and fragrant. Then I'm adding in my bell peppers next for about a 2-minute head start. These are going to be a little bit more dense than our onions, so we're going to want to give those a little bit of extra time on heat ahead of those onions, which are a little bit more delicate. Then I'm adding my chicken back to the wok and giving another toss to combine, and then following up with our reduced sauce and cornstarch slurry to thicken things up. Then finally, rounding this all out, last but not least, I'm adding in a half cup of cashews, tossing 1 more time, finishing this all off with some sesame seeds, and we're ready to eat. Okay, so if we're comparing, there are definitely a number of ingredients that we have omitted in our version here relative to the P.F. Chang's version. The mushrooms, celery, bamboo shoots, water chestnuts, and almonds were all left behind, and for what it's worth, any of these would be a lovely addition to a stir fry in the right context. So if you don't happen to have bell peppers or onions on hand, 1 or 2 of these alternate veggies would be a great sub. But I also think that by leaving out all of these extra veggies, we're able to pull a lot more focus onto what really should be the highlight of the dish today, which are the cashews, which I love in a stir fry. Our cashews are tender but also toothsome for a nice textural addition, kind of like a peanut in a Kung Pao chicken, and also have a subtly sweet quality to them, which pairs really well with the smokiness of our chicken thigh. Then our bright acid-forward sauce element that we assembled is a really nice complement to the sweetness of those cashews without overwhelming or washing their flavor out entirely. Then finally, I also thought that the addition of those Thai chilies gives just the right amount of heat to our stir fry, making for a wonderfully light, bright, and subtly sweet cashew chicken, which is exactly what this dish should be. Okay, so that's it everyone. I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you give this one a shot. For those new to the channel, this one is part of a larger series dedicated to reproducing classic Americanized Asian cuisine, including a whole bunch of stuff from the P.F. Chang's menu. So definitely check that out next if you haven't yet, because there's a lot of these. For the Bay Area locals, the Woo Can Cook Fried Rice Pop-Up is back at Original Pattern Brewing this Sunday, so come by and say hi then if you can. More about that at woocancook.com/eats. As always, like, comment, subscribe, share, be nice humans, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
And where do I belong when I'm lost in a crowd? And tell me, baby, do you ever feel the shadow? Do you feel